Hey everyone, and welcome to Campus Pulse. I'm Jessica Berge. Imagine for a moment that you're an undergraduate student and you're handed $1 million, real money, and you're told to manage it. Not in a simulation, not in a case study, but an actual investment portfolio that you are responsible for. Welcome to the Applied Investment Program at the University of Wisconsin-Whitewater. Today, I'm talking with Neal Dihora, an adjunct instructor in our Finance and Business Law Department and director of the AIP. Neal isn't your typical professor. He's a CFA charter holder who spent 2 decades on Wall Street, managing portfolios at firms like Wasatch Global Investors, Nicholas Company, and Morningstar. And now he's teaching UWW students how to analyze companies, build portfolios, and think like professional investors. We're going to talk about what it's like to manage real money as a college student, how AIP prepares students for careers in finance, what the Finance and Business Law Department offers, and why Neal believes that behavioral finance matters more than most people realize. So let's dive in. So Neal, we're here to talk today mainly about the Applied Investment Program, AIP, and you're the director. For someone that's never heard of it, what is AIP and what makes it unique?
First of all, thanks for having me. This is really exciting.
We're so happy you're here.
I've never done a podcast before, so hopefully it's the first of many versions of this that we can do over time. Yeah, the Applied Investment Program is what's technically known as a student-managed investment fund at a university, and so there are many universities in the United States that have this. The real difference of an AIP program or something like that at a university is students get the opportunity to manage real money against real market participants. So there's nothing fake about it. We have a pool of capital that's currently over 1.5 million, and we select around 10 students per year into this program. It's considered a very high honor to be selected into that group. And what each student does is they have a group of companies that they're expected to research and follow through the first and second semester. So maybe I'll back up a little bit, but it's a full year program. So you get in, you interview, you get in, and you're expected to stay both of the semesters. But the primary difference is that you are managing real capital and real funds, and there's real consequences, meaning if we're going to give X number of scholarships based on fund returns, that's on the students. And that's why they have to take a fiduciary duty. And fiduciary duty is a very important concept in finance where you're trying to do something for the betterment of the fund, not for yourself, not for anybody else. So you have to take risk and reward into account. And that's a lot of the discussions that we have in the applied program is, what are we trying to do here? And what are the risks that we're taking versus the reward that we're trying to earn?
So you spent 20 years as an investment professional, portfolio manager, research analyst, working at firms like Wasatch Global Investors and Morningstar. What brought you from Wall Street to teaching at UW-Whitewater?
I think if I go back to just where I was born in a family of cotton farmers in India. And every year we would go through these seasons where we wouldn't have enough money for seed or fertilizer or whatever inputs that we needed. My uncle was terrible at finance. I mean, the guy would borrow money on a monthly interest rate lock. So we were paying 3, 4, 5% on a monthly basis. So if you do the math of just very simple interest, I mean, we're paying 24, 36, or 48% interest. So I think finance is, started out very early for me in the context of not being able to experience the positive side of finance.
Mm-hmm.
So after 20 years, I think I began to ask myself what the purpose of what I was doing was. And I think I really wanted to kind of give back. And the best way that I know how to give back is to teach other people and give them the opportunity that I've had over my lifetime. So, coming over here from India, going to school at UW-Madison, being able to participate in the investment arena in the United States has been fantastic. I've been able to travel the world along with the United States to research companies, ask management's questions, talk to suppliers, talk to distributors, everything in between. And so what I really want is the next generation to be able to experience what I've experienced, to give them the opportunity to, improve their family's situation, their lives, and hopefully their kids and grandkids' lives.
Thank you for sharing that. That's interesting insight that I really think students would appreciate, kind of a real authentic story of why it matters. So thank you so much. So you're an instructor in the Finance and Business Law Department. For people who don't know, how does that role work alongside your investment career?
Yeah, so essentially, the Applied Investment Program started out more of as an academic exercise when John Howitt founded it in 2001. And Scott Opsel, who took over in 2012, was a practitioner, and he sort of transitioned the program from more of academic to more of a practitioner style version. And when RJ took it over in 2016 and 2017, he continued that legacy of a professional teaching the kids how to act professionally, do what you would do on your job while being part of the program. So the difference between teaching Introduction to Finance 344, which is I also do that, and teaching the Applied Investment Program is there is an expectation that each student will look at you, meaning me, the teacher, as a peer, and I look at them as a peer. And so when we're discussing ideas, questions, anything about the company, it's not so much me telling them what something is. It's more like me asking them, and we're trying to get to an answer together because finance is dynamic. It's changing. It's all the time, and there's new information coming in. And so the students are expected to behave in the same way that you would do on a professional team, which is that your manager asks you a question, and we're trying to get to the answer together because the manager is asking you a question because they have more experience. There's nothing else, there. It's not that they're the highest IQ person in the room or anything like that. They've been in the trenches. They've done the work, and now what we're doing is we're trying to get to that answer together. So that's how I see it differently. So when I teach 344, I don't have an expectation that the students will have an answer. I assume they put me on some sort of an elevation level of like, hey, you are teaching me something of the basic skills, and I feel like we can do that. But I think that's the major difference of the other classes that I teach from the applied perspective is that it's not so much teaching like on a one to many. It's more like we're asking questions that we're going to want to come to the solution together, and can we learn that way? So that's mainly the difference between the applied programs versus the other classes at finance.
So walk me through what it's like to be a student in AIP. You said that they're operating on a peer basis with you, that they're researching different organizations. What's that day-to-day experience? Like, how do they respond when they realize this is real money, that they're in charge of it? Like, tell me what their process might be.
Yeah. So in April every year, we ask the student body to apply if they're interested in the program, the Applied Investment Program. And then through the next 2 weeks, we'll interview them either one time or multiple times, depending on, sort of the responses that we get. Last year, it was 2 of us that interviewed them. This year, I'm going to ask one of the students that was a participant a year ago to join me in the interviews as well. Mm-hmm. So a day in the life of AIP. You make the program, you're accepted. The next day, you get an email from me saying, this is the portfolio of holdings that we have. You need to pick 5 to 6 names out of the 50 names totals that you think you are interested in covering. After each of the students selects their names, I basically go in and figure out how I'm going to crop up the list to each of the individual students. So they might like to cover some things, but we may not be able to give everybody what they like. Mm-hmm. Once they get that list, they're expected to go and figure out what each of these companies does. How does the company generate money? What levels of money are they going to generate? How fast is that growing? And then they have to take all that information and compare it to what the stock market says that company is expected to do as well. And then they have to tell me and the rest of the team in email and or written work and or presentation format what we should do with the company in terms of the portfolio that position that we have currently. And so you sort of multiply that one individual company with the number of names that you have, and then we have 10 students. So that's how we get to the 50 to 60 names that we hold in our portfolio. A day in the life can be anything. If the stock is moving dynamically that day, meaning up or down a lot, that may be course for them to email the rest of the team and ask them for help or tell them about what's going on. If there's nothing going on, they may be doing a long-term project that tries to assess whether we should be in the areas that they're covering or whether we should be in other newer areas. So it's a daunting task on day one, and most kids are flabbergasted and shocked and scared about what they're doing. But, I think they talk to the prior year's students, and they sort of get an understanding of what they did, what they went through. And the real conclusion that people get is this is going to be a lot of late nights that are going to be required for them to fulfill the tasks that they have just now earned. I mean, it's sort of a silly and crazy exercise, right? You apply for this position, it ends up being a real job, and you're up at 2 or 3 in the morning trying to complete the work that you've promised now to do. And so I think I've never had anybody tell me that they regretted it, but you can see that it is a difficult task. But this is what the real world is like. I mean, if you were an investment analyst that got selected by a company in the real world, there are going to be nights where you will be up until 1, 2, 3, 4 in the morning trying to figure out what to do, what not to do, and how to communicate your research to your team.
So obviously a hugely demanding task ahead of them, right? And this is seen as an honors program. They are, they self-select and then you pick the ones that make it. Um, I'm guessing at the end, it's also extremely rewarding, right? Extremely fulfilling. They're benchmarked against the S&P 500. So how are they feeling? Like, I'm guessing there are many times where they're outperforming, many times where they're not quite there. Like, what is that end result with them? How do those conversations go as they're learning this process and starting to kind of feel the rhythm of it and the excitement of it?
Yeah, I think most of the students, when they're covering their names, take most ownership and most reward and the way that they feel about the world based on the performance of their individual names. It takes a long time for any individual team member, whether in professional world or in this applied investment program, to sort of look at the portfolio as in its entirety and sort of feel that performance, whether you're good or not. So you can have elation if your portfolio is doing well, but going back to my professional days, when I was a portfolio manager of a particular fund, I would look at that performance, daily on a 1 month trailing, 3 month trailing, 1 year trailing. But when I was just an analyst, I actually didn't do that. You didn't have the same sort of weight that you carry because you were so focused on your individual names. That's where you were an analyst for. That's what you're covering. And so I think a lot of the students sort of they take their names and how their names are doing, and that's sort of the reflection that they get in terms of whether they're doing a good job or a bad job. The portfolio management itself like I said, it takes a while. And so at the beginning of this second semester, the students will be taking more of an active role in the managing of the portfolio in itself. So what we're going to try to do in this second semester is have each student pick their coverage and then ask other students like, hey, should we be buying more of this, selling more of this? Because I've done the work on these individual names, but I want to have the understanding of what it's really like to be a portfolio manager. So to date, the fund is actually trailing the S&P 500, and there's a couple of nuances because of that. And I haven't checked in the last week, but as of year end, we were slightly trailing, which is it's dynamic because a month before that we were actually outperforming, and so things are very sort of volatile these days. I mean, we have news things that can take on a life of their own. The other thing we're trying to do in the applied investment program is also balancing the short term and the long term. And these students only have the portfolio for a year, which is really an insignificant period of time in terms of what we should really be trying to do with how to grow the portfolio. So it is really difficult, and that's why that is the reason why I said that most of the students, when they kind of look at their elation or lack thereof, they're really looking at their individual recommendations and how those are going.
Right. No, that completely makes sense. So the students are working on actual Bloomberg terminals and they're using real stocks, real companies in a cycle of real news, right? And that is, of course, dynamic. So when a student is done with this program, the kind of experience that they're getting, how is that important to them? Like when they are interviewing, when they're ready for their next career path, explain how that's entirely different than, Finance 344.
Yeah, the program offers the students a unique way to sort of experience and improve their critical and analytical thinking skills. First and foremost, you will have the director, whether it's myself or my predecessors, RJ and Scott and Dr. Howitt. They will ask really deep questions, and the answers are not obvious. And so the first point of sort of improving their critical thinking skills is trying to answer our questions. So that's a basic improvement. So when they go and interview, I'm asking them the exact same questions that an interviewer might ask them, right? Because we're all trying to get to the same thing. Is it, why are you recommending this company to me? What do you think it's good or bad about it? And then translate that into why the stock is interesting here. And so they get that experience many times over during the school year. And that's really the real benefit from just if they want to get a job in equity analyst or fixed income analysis or something within the analytical finance arena. Beyond that, I think what we're really trying to teach is, when you read something, you cannot just trust it for what it is. You really have to go and verify it, right? I think we have a saying in the program this year: if it's in God we trust, we absolutely do. The rest have to bring the data, right? And I think I've adjusted it a little bit because, look, I think everybody can respect the following statement: in God and your mom, you should trust, and then everybody else should bring the data, right? So we've sort of we sort of said, hey, there are very, very few things in life that you should really just kind of take, at face value, and everything else has to be verified. And so that's the other really big lesson that I think we're trying to teach them is, you have to do your own work. You have to come to those conclusions. There's no shortcuts. And that's really what they take away from the program is there are no shortcuts because I or RJ or whoever is going to force them to defend whatever position that they're taking. And that's going to make their interview season so much easier because they've already have had the skills. They've already had the answers and practice and all that stuff for what they're going to experience in their next sort of, short term in their careers.
Sure. So obviously this is an exciting program, right? And it sets them up for really strong interviews on the other end. What separates students who succeed in AIP versus those who might struggle?
I think when students are applying for the Applied Investment Program, the question really is, what is their true passion? What is their level of curiosity? How much of it is self-induced and how much of it is more of a resume driver?
Mm-hmm.
And so I think the students that want to put a program like this on their resume but don't really have the true passion or curiosity, we might accept them. We're not, we can't see the future. We don't know. And we're trying to give the most number of kids the best opportunities that we can, right? That's sort of our job. That's sort of from this perspective. And like I said at the beginning, that, finance is like a historically important concept for me from when I was born into these, the cotton farming opportunity, if you want to call it that.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that's sort of what we're saying. The differentiation is if you really have passion, if you really have curiosity for this field and what you're trying to do, you're going to succeed. And if you're just trying to look at it from a resume perspective, you might get in, but you're not going to really be the successful person out of AIP.
Okay. Wonderful. So you also mentioned during this conversation that you're interested in behavioral finance and that a lot of the students might be. How does that show up in your teaching?
Yeah, so I think the behavioral finance has been a fantastical exercise in research from the 1970s to today, right? I mean, I think if we look at just financial theory back in the day, we were all supposed to be rational human beings. We act in logical fashion, and we look at we assume that every human being has an understanding of all the different factual realities that are in place, and none of those things are really true, right? So most of the assumptions that we make in what they call Homo economicus is really false, right?
Mm-hmm.
Most people behave very, very differently. And so when we talk about how humans really behave, I do it in both the financial analysis through Bloomberg, FactSet, and Wall Street Prep, which is the other class I teach, and the Applied Investment Program. We talk about decision making and how to make a process out of it. So you want to be able to create for yourself a repeatable process that you can follow, so that you can take a little bit of the emotion out of some of the decisions that you're going to be forced to make, right? So I think that's one of the important things about behavioral finance is you have to know what kind of a human you are. And so like one of the things that we talk about is human beings weight losses way more heavily than they weight gains. So if you are going to go and pick a stock and you think the stock is going to go up 5%, and it does, you won't be as happy as if it went down 5%. If it's the same number, right? You pick a stock, you buy it at 100, it goes to 95. The weight of that loss on your psyche is way more than if the stock goes to 105. And so you have to know that, right? You have to know that's how you're going to feel when you look at these stocks. And what kind of a decision will you make? Will you be anchoring on the $100 price target? Can you look at the stock when it goes to 95 on a non-emotional basis? Is it a time to buy? Is it a time to do nothing? Is it a time just to watch it? And these are the things that we're trying to teach them before they get into that position, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we try to do that unemotional research. We try to get them to think about what their decision-making process will be at different price points. And I think it's hugely important in portfolio management because it's been proven that most portfolio managers in the mutual fund arena underperform their benchmarks. And they do so because they act emotionally in most times, right? So when a stock goes down 10, 15, 20%, the weight of that on your psyche is significantly more than if you had a gain of the stock on 15, 20%. And so you stare at it, you don't like it, and you're basically going to tell yourself to sell it one way or another because you just don't feel good,
Mm-hmm.
right? And it may be the worst time to do it.
Is that a mistake you typically see students making and you're trying to help them work through? Or is that just an experience that kind of everyone shares and everyone is always processing going through that?
Right. So, I mean, clearly most humans feel loss aversion in the same way, even
Right.
though they may not call it that.
Mm-hmm.
The Applied program has taken sort of some of that into account. And what we do is we try to have 10 or 9 students vote on whether the recommendation from the other student, if we have a group of 10, is going to be in favor or not in favor. And so we're trying to take that emotion out by having other people basically help them out, right? So the analyst who now has to react to the price change, he might be emotional, she might be emotional, but the other nine may not be. They may not be
Mm-hmm.
exposed to it. They just don't care. They can look at that analysis in a non-emotional, maybe even a rational, logical format and say, yeah, well, it's all fine. It's not that bad. We're not going to do anything. Or, what it really sounds like is you're really excited about it, but you're just scared. So we're going to buy some more. And you don't have to be scared. We're going to kind of help you out. So I think we've tried to take that team environment and the voting mechanism to try to drown or dampen some of the individual characteristics that laws aversion or behavioral finance kind of brings into the play.
Where do AIP students wind up after graduation? Are they landing jobs on Wall Street, investment firms, financial planning? What's a typical path?
So when we go back to that, the realistic mirror question of, are you really passionate and curious about investments, or are you just doing this for different reasons? The outcome is driven by that, right? If you're really, really passionate about this, some of our students will go on to getting a master's program and then go into the field. It's really across the board. I mean, we've had people go into financial planning, we've had people go into equity investments, we've had people go into fixed income, whether they've done that straight through the UW Whitewater AIP or whether they've had some interim statements is sort of across the board. And I don't think I have a good statistic for that, meaning like X% or Y% go through this, but I think we've had it all across the board. We have had people who have been entrepreneurs after going through the AIPs. They've done their own businesses essentially and started them and been very successful. So I think the combination of that critical thinking, analytical skills, maybe some of this behavioral finance stuff that we've been opening their eyes to will help them figure out what to do next. And I think I would say the people that have gone through AIP, whether they're in equity investments or not, I think they really feel like we've changed their lives and for the better. Meaning, the fact that we made them work until 1 a.m, ask them these really hard questions that other classes were not asking of them, really pushed them to improve their own skill sets and look in the mirror and say, "Hey, I'm a really, really smart individual. I can do whatever I want to do." And the fact that I am here answering these questions at 1 a.m. proves that I have the ability, I have the skill set, I have the drive to get there.
Love that answer. That's fantastic. Thank you. So let's zoom out and talk about the finance and business law department as a whole. What makes finance program at Kobe stand out?
So we have a lot of different courses, right? So you can sort of figure out the path that you want to take. Um, if you want to be just in finance as an introductory, basically understanding the basic first level finance stuff, we can do that. If you want to have specializations in something like the applied program, we have something like that. We have some club structures that'll help you sort of get around these areas. We have access to professionals in the marketplace, especially if I bring it back to the applied investment program. I mean, through something like that, if you're really curious, if you're passionate about it, we can help you go and meet people in the actual field. We have speakers that come in some of the club areas, which I think is a key differentiator, because if we have speakers from banking, from corporate finance, from investments, from fixed income, students get the opportunity to really figure out what they're curious about, what they're passionate about. And I think that's really the difference is, can we help them assess what really piques their interest in life, right? Because when you enter any new program or any new area, whether it's undergraduate school, graduate school, you really don't know what you want to do. You think you do. You absolutely think you do. But, you take 2 classes, you talk to a few folks, and you change your mind. For example, I mean, I was an actuarial science student in my undergrad. I have a degree in that, and I practiced it for 3 years, and I said, it's not for me. So really, I think we're trying to give them enough scope and experience to see what it is that interests them.
You also run the Capital Markets Club. What's the mission there, and how does it complement what you're doing in AIP?
Yeah, the Capital Markets Club was set up really to figure out a way to help students who are interested in investments to give them a little experience. So the first thing that we want to do is we want freshmen and sophomore to get in and have some conversations with juniors and seniors who have been in the program already and really figure out what it is that's exciting about investments. I think most students that are freshmen that come in, they've invested in something and they want to know what's different about what they did when they invested in something versus what a professional investor may do when they're investing. So the Capital Markets Club is that goal. We're trying to marry your interest in investments with professionalizing it to some extent. We're not going to get to the whole way, right? The applied investment program is sort of on another level. what we want Capital Markets Club to be is a fun place where you as a freshman, sophomore can have conversations with juniors, seniors, and vice versa. So we get this natural mentoring of the older kids to the younger kids, and then we get the interest in the excitement levels from the freshmen and sophomores back into the juniors and seniors.
Mm-hmm.
And we do a little bit of teaching on what we can use, some of the tools that we have access to as a university. I'll just mention one of them. We have a campus-wide license for something called FactSet. FactSet is a database sort of program that helps you find a lot of information about companies, markets, and all that, and everything in between, really. But that's one of the things that we can help you understand is, hey, how do you get information? What's an easy way to do it? How do I learn about companies? Can I read something that somebody else has written? And then two, we want them to be able to communicate their ideas, their interest levels, their curiosities, all those things by making presentations to the rest of the club. And as a freshman or sophomore, is it daunting? Absolutely. But it's supposed to be that, right? It's supposed to be scary. I want you to go up there. I want to see some sweat underneath your underarm. And, if you do it 2 or 3 times, you realize how easy it is.
Mm-hmm.
The first time won't be easy, won't be fun. But you got to go through. You got to be able to communicate your story, right? That's one of the things that I've tried to do in all the courses that I've taught here is sort of convince the students that if you go through all the classes that we have at Kobe, you have to be able to communicate something when you get to that interview. You have to be able to communicate your story. What is it about you that's unique? Why do you want to work for this company? What do you think this company is going to give you? What are you going to give this company? This is no different than telling us why you like an investment, why you like this company. Tell us why this company is interesting. Tell us why we should buy the stock. It's just another way for the kids to practice what it is that we want them to do, which is to be able to analyze something and then communicate it.
The investment world has changed dramatically, right? Robo-advisors, algorithmic trading, retail investing apps. How are you preparing students for the industry that they're actually entering, not the one from 20 years ago?
Yeah, I mean, there have been a lot of different changes. And I think the basic rule in finance is that change is always a constant, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's always been dynamic. There isn't something that says 20 years ago finance was easy. There's actually never been a time that finance has been easy. And the reason why is because all financial products are based on something that's going to happen in the future, and the future cannot be predicted accurately. So whether an AI machine or a robot or anything in between wants to tell us that they can predict the future, it can't. It just can't. It doesn't work that way. It never will work that way. We can create an entire world of AI, and the AI still won't be able to predict its own future, right? Because it doesn't know. Nothing is known. Um, let's just say that AI took over the world and there was a solar flare that shut down all the AIs. I mean, what, right?
Mm-hmm.
We don't know. We don't know. So I really do think that teaching them the skills of analysis, critical thinking, questioning people, trust but verify, all that stuff is going to be the same solution set to have a successful career in finance or any other field as that it was 20 years ago versus today. Now, the difference I think in some of the applied classes that I have the opportunity to teach is we have them use a lot of AI. We're trying to have them prompt and what they're getting. And so I'll just go through one quick exercise that we had them do in the fall semesters. I had them research the company of their choice. We had them answer maybe 10 to 15 questions. And then I said, ask AI the same questions that I just asked you, and let's see what it gives. Let's see what it comes up with. And then I want you to read what the AI said and what you came up with and compare the two. And the majority of the conclusions across a sample of 30 students was that the AI didn't really do a good job of analysis. And this is very recent, right? And so has something come up in the last month that's it's been a vast improvement? Absolutely. And it's going to keep going that way. But my point is, the way that we're going to try to use AI and all these other tools is to keep prompting them and learn how to use them. And I think that's what I want most of my students to do is continue to um, push that utilization of the AI tools that are available, but not to, basically skip the thinking part. And I think that's the difference is can we still teach them how to think, how to ask questions, how to, again, trust but verify, and then, prompt the AI in the correct way so that we can actually get information from it, not just the thinking from it.
Thank you so much for sharing all this information. Your passion is completely coming through, and I know that people will be excited to hear this episode. But as we are hitting our time limit, what is something that you'd like our listeners or our students to know that you haven't yet had a chance to share?
Yeah, I think the main thing I want to say is that I have come to Whitewater from sort of the experiences that have led through me through my life, meaning growing up in that cotton community, not having a lot of stuff for us, and I know the demographic of UW Whitewater is that 40% of our students are first to college for their families. My hope and desire is that they get the opportunity to do what they want to do, find their passion, find their curiosity. And if it's investments, I hope that you join the Capital Markets Club, you try out for an applied investment program, you interview, and you get all the sort of skill sets that you want. And yeah, I hope to see you in one of my classes. Really, I teach 344, which is Introduction to Finance. I teach this Introduction to or Financial Analysis with Bloomberg, FactSet, and Wall Street Prep, and I teach the Applied Investment Program. I hope to see you in one of those classes.
That's fantastic. Neal, thank you so much for bringing Wall Street to Whitewater and actually bringing your real world experience to us. I mean, it really enriches everyone's experience.
Thank you
So
so much
thank
for
you.
having me. Yeah.
Thanks so much for listening to Campus Pulse. And Neal, thank you for bringing Wall Street to Whitewater and giving our students opportunities that most undergrads simply don't get. If you're interested in learning more about the Applied Investment Program, applications are due April 1st. You can find details at appliedinvestments.org or contact Neal directly. And if you want to learn more about the FMA Capital Markets Club, visit uwwfma.org. If you enjoyed this episode, subscribe wherever you get your podcasts so you don't miss what we're uncovering next. Campus Pulse is part of the Warhawk Business Voices podcast network. You can find all of our shows and transcripts at uww.edu/Kobe/podcasts. That's uwww.edu/COBE/PODCASTS. Once again, I'm Jessica Berge, and I'll talk to you next time.